Happy unbirthday! Pull up a chair and pour yourself a cup of tea. I had originally planned to make this one way later in the year, so that I would finally play American McGee's Alice, but fate deemed it otherwise. My mental health kind of took a nosedive during April and May and took my physical health with it, and because of my obnoxious nature I decided, you know what? I need a game that's about having a mental breakdown to go with this actual mental breakdown. I wound up absolutely adoring American McGee's Alice, to the point where I moved this video way up in my schedule so that I can talk about it now while it's still fresh. Aside from everything I'll talk about in this video, is this not simply the most Juliette core game ever made? It's an id tech game with extreme levels of goth girl energy. This is an intersection of all of my interests. Frankly, this game deserves this spot as the stereotypical T-girl video game over Fallout New Vegas. It's a wonderful dose of aughts-era alt-girl aesthetics, which is perfect for my birthday massacre listening ass. Probably the biggest barrier to Alice's popularity is the fact that the game is essentially out of print and from 2000. And frankly, way too many people are unwilling to play anything that's even pre-8th generation. Therefore, New Vegas gets the spot for some reason beyond my comprehension. Or maybe you people could actually acknowledge us as individuals with varying tastes, but that's probably too much to ask for. Anyway, I found this silly little third-person shooter way more profound than you might expect. It has a way more interesting perspective on sanity and insanity than most video games, and I don't know, I found it pretty meaningful. Chapter 1. Several nice little stories about children who had got burnt and eaten up by wild beasts and other unpleasant things, all because they would not remember the simple rules their friends had taught them. Mental health is a frequent subject in video games, and just as frequent is its use not being interesting. As a contrasting case with Alice, let's talk about another game real quick. It just so happens that at the same time I played Alice for this video, I was also playing some of Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, and while I am really loving that game, its execution of that mechanic leaves more than a bit to be desired. Sanity in Eternal Darkness is a meter that needs to be managed alongside health and magic. Leaving it low causes all sorts of effects that mess with the player, which is one of the things that Eternal Darkness is most famous for. Here's the thing though, in my ongoing playthrough, I've barely seen any of them, because sanity is extremely easy to manage. You have magic that restores it that can be used almost anywhere, and any time, and any sanity you lose from enemies can be recouped by killing them with finishing moves. Since the combat is really easy, the overall impression of the game's take on cosmic horror is less, I went insane from the horrors, and more, I would simply tolerate the horrors. The effect is that it becomes campy action horror game a la Evil Dead. Great game, but not really the interesting take on the kind of horror they seem to have been trying to go for. I'll grant that the way video games typically handle physical health is also an abstraction. Video game characters typically move and fight just as effectively when they're on the brink of death as they do when they're in peak condition. Fun fact, this is because hit points were first invented to model battles between ironclad ships during the American Civil War, and in that context it actually does make sense. Sadly, real-life human beings are not ironclad ships. Sorry to all my robot girl viewers for having to deliver this news to you. Video games that feature mental health mechanics often treat them in much the same way. It's something that's lost quickly and clearly, and regained just as quickly. It's not particularly interesting to me. Most of the times my mental health has been dented. I didn't notice in the moment, and the dent either only slowly healed or never did. Alice's take on it is refreshing to me by comparison. Wonderland is a creation of Alice's mind, just like it is in the original 2 books, and therefore the whole game is centered around Alice's mental state. Rather than it just being a meter to manage, it's the going concern of the story. And Alice's fractured mental landscape becomes the physical world itself. The idea of it was all a dream or it was all in their head is actually a fun way to structure a narrative in my opinion, when it's used deliberately and not just for edgy fan theories about children's cartoons. If you're the type to get mad that a dream story didn't really happen, I've got bad news for you regarding all of fiction. All in their head stories are a great avenue for fantasy storytelling, since the way the world appears is a direct reflection of the mentality of the character and the conflicts they're going through, and Alice is a prime example of this. American McGee's take on Alice is actually a sequel to the 2 books rather than a retelling. This version of Alice is racked with guilt and traumatized after becoming the only survivor of a fire that destroyed the family's home, and has spent most of the last decade or so in catatonia in a mental hospital. Therefore, Wonderland is ruined and under the dictatorial control of the Queen of Hearts, who here represents Alice's survivor's guilt. Setting the whole game inside the mind of one of the characters is a much more interesting way to communicate those themes. When the terrain itself is the character's psyche, that's a way more interesting way to communicate ideas about sanity than having it be a second health bar. Instead, since it's all in the mind, your physical and mental health are one. Lastly, the framing narrative is very fun for readers of the two Carol books. Part of the joy of American McGee's Alice is seeing how people and scenery of Wonderland have been twisted by the past 10 years of horror. It's a more elevated version of the impulse to point at the screen and say, "I know what that is!" like Mike's DeClassa, where you're instead admiring the fun ways in which the past 10 years have filtered Alice's imagination into something beautiful and terrifying. Many of the friendly characters of Wonderland die in the course of the story, a reflection of Alice's guilt, and the Jabberwocky and the Queen directly accuse her on this subject. Alice's strength comes from her perseverance. Although she cries a few times, like at the deaths of the White Rabbit and the Griffin, she keeps moving. Put a pin in that, I want to discuss it further later on. For now, though, just know that it is inspiring to me, and not just because I could do an absolutely killer American McGee's Alice cosplay. That sure does help, though. We are now in the intermission for this video, and today I wanted to talk about both the Disney version and the Tim Burton version of Alice, both of which I watched for the first time during the process of making this video. When I was a kid, we had a bunch of the Disney movies on VHS, and Alice was not one of them, and so I never watched it until recently, and I really like the Disney version. It does kind of have the opposite point of the original, because, like, you know, you have the whole scene where Alice, like, laments being lost in Wonderland, just being like, oh, if I'd only listened to my teacher, when, like, the original is sort of like nonsense literature as a rebellion against, like, the very polemical way that children's literature was at the time of the book's writing. But aside from that, I think it's very, very creative visually and fun. I like the songs. Like, nobody gives a lot of the songs from that era of Disney enough credit in my mind, because people are so focused on the Renaissance era songs, which are great, but, you know, leave some space open for everything else. On the other hand, the Tim Burton movie is fucking dog shit. Good lord, what an awful movie. I watched it a few hours before this recording, and the reason I'm speaking a little bit softly is because it's very late at night, and I don't want to bother my neighbors. But yes, that Tim Burton movie. The idea of making Wonderland a real place that exists is really stupid. It's barely even, Wonderland is barely even, like, weird. All that's really, like, weird about it is that there's, like, fantastic creatures, and they have the potion and the cake that's shrink and grow you, and that's it. Otherwise, it's just, like, generic, like, fantasy Destiny slop, I guess. And, like, there's a lot of sort of implication that, like, it's very Tim Burton-y to, like, you know, sort of gesture at queerness and then be like, nah, actually, it's just, like, you know, this person just wants to, you know, not be in suburbia or whatever, or the Victorian equivalent, right? And at the end, she's like, I'm gonna girl boss so hard that I'm going to go do colonialism, which is crazy. That is a crazy thing to put in a movie. Like, good lord. Like, whew, good lord. It's grim. I fucking hated that movie. I was originally going to talk about both of them. I was originally going to watch the second one, but I'm like, I don't want to do that. These intermissions are optional, so I decided not to. Your game recommendation for today is Quake Brutalism Jam 3, and I recommend getting the Libra Quake version that's just one easy install. First of all, because you shouldn't support any Microsoft products right now because of the boycott, and secondly, it's just easy if you're not really experienced with Quake modding. But yeah, if you like shooters and cool architecture, you gotta. And your movie for this time is Go West, the Buster Keaton feature. Yes, it's another Keaton. I love Keaton. I'm not apologizing for it. But this one is really, really adorable because it's centered around the friendship between Buster Keaton and this cow, and it's really, really cute. So please go check those out. Go West actually was what kind of convinced me to give vegetarianism another shot, because I thought that the cow was so cute. Please don't forget, I have a Ko-Fi for this channel if you'd like to send me a tip. It really would help me out. But anyway, let's get back to it. Chapter 2. Sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. One thing that can be difficult to square as a lover of video games is how focused they can often be on mastery and conquest. Almost any game I can think of, and certainly most of the ones I like, are focused on exerting mastery over a digital space, claiming it for yourself. It can get a little bit individualistic or even solipsistic, and that presents a bit of a quandary for me as a communist. After all, I believe in the dictatorship of the proletariat, not the dictatorship of the me. How do we make all these squares make a circle? Alice's answer is interesting. It is not good for an individual to conquer a territory. Now, when the proletariat works together to do it, that's a different story, but most video games aren't anything like that. Alice sidesteps this issue by presenting a challenge. If you must conquer and gain control of something, do so over your own mind. Our heroine's journey, and even all the violence she does as part of it, is ultimately restorative. When the Queen of Hearts is defeated at the end of the game, all the dead creatures are reborn, and the whimsical world of Alice's childhood returns. It's a fantasy that anyone can understand, the fantasy of being able to fix yourself and heal from willpower alone. Obviously, this is still unrealistic. It is still a fantasy. No one can fix the damage to their psyche purely by willpower. If it could be done, I would have done it by now. Coping has not been an individual process, and I don't think it can be for anyone. Alice's only help comes from the denizens of her own mind. She's certainly not getting any support in the Victorian mental institution she lives in. That's why it's a fantasy, but it's one that we might desperately wish for. It only serves to make me even more grateful that people bear with me during my most difficult moments. That fantasy, the idea that I can will myself better, is one that I've been thinking on a fair bit recently. Like I said, my brain kind of collapsed in on itself from stress, financial woes, and illness in the past few months. And the idea that I can grit my teeth and eat that horse all on my own is a comfort, like a plushie I can squeeze as necessary. Squeezing a plushie is an apt metaphor, since it brings temporary comfort, but is ultimately not a solution to the source of the discomfort. And my discomfort has been pretty profound lately. I'm like 99.99% sure that I have OCD. I never considered this until earlier this year, because I mostly knew the stereotypes about OCD. But that changed when I learned that compulsions can be mental activities such as excessive rumination, or mentally reviewing past events. My primary compulsion outside of my own head is repeatedly asking reassurance from others. The amount of times I've asked my girlfriend, "Am I dying?" in complete earnestness is possibly in the triple digits already, because of how persistent my health OCD is. It's really unnerving to believe wholeheartedly that you're going to die of some illness that there's no way to prevent. I've lost a lot of sleep to thoughts like that. I earnestly worry that it's an impediment to me as a Marxist. One of the key principles of Marxism is materialism. Our beliefs should be rooted in reality. We should observe the world and develop our ideas based on what we learn. I worry that I can't be useful as a materialist if my mind is constantly inventing things that have no basis in material reality for me to stress out over. It's difficult to even think about work of any kind when you're absolutely convinced that you're going to die in your sleep from anaphylactic shock or a stroke, or you're absolutely positive that you're going to go to prison because you accidentally bumped into someone on the tram. The fact that I waste so much time ruminating only makes me feel even worse. I understand that the point of life is not efficiency, but regardless, I would still like to be more efficient. Beyond that, I fear the idea that my OCD might get so debilitating that I can't work anymore. My hope is that this will never happen and that eventually I'll be able to get some kind of therapy, but it's a thought in the back of my head that will not be dislodged. All of that is why American McGee's Alice became an unexpected comfort. Alice's resilience in the face of the torments her own mind subjects her to is inspiring to me, if I'm being honest. The most important sources of courage in my life are my girlfriend and my friends, but having stuff like this is a nice supplement too. In reality, no woman is an island like Alice has to be in this game. Tell someone you care about that you love them. Basically, my point in all of this is that you should give me money so that I can buy plushy dreadfuls. This would fix my mental health in a jiffy. Also, video games are for women.